Tomorrow, our country will observe Memorial Day. It is a time when the nation remembers those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. The American story is wrought with valiant and heart-wrenching narratives of those who have given their lives for the cause of liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and the promise of the American dream. Today, in this service, we come with gratitude to honor these fallen heroes with our words, our respect, and our memories. These individuals, many of whom remain anonymous except to the families and friends who love them, gave their lives for the defense of this nation. It is the passion story of sacrifice and service. Jesus said and demonstrated best, "Greater love has no man than the one who lays down his life for another." These heroes came from all walks of life and from all regions of our great country. They were our relatives, friends, neighbors, and strangers alike, unified together to perform their duties for the cause of our nation. Their legacies are uniquely linked to our own personal stories. Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, quote, "Those who have long enjoyed such privileges as we enjoy forget in time that men have died to win them," end quote. Although this quote is in need of a gender-inclusive language update, we all get the idea. The point is, we are called to remember, lest we forget. Memorial Day observances began with the end of the Civil War, where more than 600,000 Americans perished from both the North and the South. Decoration Day, as it was initially known, was a very solemn occasion marked by the floral decorated graves of the fallen heroes. For the North, it was more celebratory. The observance was for the sacrifice of the soldiers that led to the freeing of slaves and the preservation of the Union. For some in the South, the rationale was entirely different. It was more mournful, not only due to the loss of the soldiers' lives, but also the loss of a cultural way of living, since the Southern economy thrived on slave labor. I've read and heard countless Memorial Day sermons that talk about how the patriots who gave their lives served and died because of love of kin and country. Working previously as a VA chaplain, I've since come to a more nuanced understanding and therefore cannot make what I now believe to be an overreaching declaration. Also, I know enough about the American history to ascertain that not every soldier who enlisted did so out of love for the country, especially when the country did not particularly love them back. And I'm speaking of marginalized people of color, specifically Black people. Some others joined as a means of economic survival. Still, some were drafted. I know some of these people. Needless to say, for many in our nation and perhaps around the world, this period can be a very complicated occasion. Some people here and abroad have been detrimentally affected by the actions of our military personnel. For them, this occasion may be a painful reminder of a loss in a very different but no less significant way. And I don't want to come across as in any way diminishing the sacrifices of our military personnel, but I find it important to acknowledge that this day may be difficult for not only those in the military, but it may have an adverse impact on many non-military individuals and families as well. We hold all of them in our hearts, and it is also for them that we are called to remembrance. In many ways, this holiday has drastically changed throughout the years. Some feel that the solemnity and sacredness of the day have been lost to a now eclectic, fun-loving observance, considered to be the unofficial beginning of summer, marked by heavy consumer marketing, parades, outdoor grilling, swimming pool openings, and weekend getaways. For many, however, this holiday is still a time where they recall the dead, albeit some take their annual pilgrimage to visit cemeteries or memorials to decorate the graves of not only their military dead, but their non-military loved ones as well. Growing up, I can recall this holiday being only about memorializing my deceased non-military relatives. There was no discussion or connection made with the military in our family's festivities for this occasion. And there are many in our nation who do not have anyone close to them who died in a military conflict or war. And it may be difficult for them to relate to the loss and to feel what is needed during this time. A true appreciation for the day might only be felt if they were able to connect this occasion with the loss of a non-military loved one or personal friend. Working as a chaplain at the VA, at the Veterans Medical Center, I had the opportunity to be at the bedside of several veterans at the time of their deaths. And I have previously told you about a few of them. I count these moments as some of the most humbling and rewarding experiences of my entire vocation. And there's one story that especially stands out. When I asked a nurse about the family of a dying veteran to whose bedside I had been called, she remarked, "He has no one." Although I had heard this before in other instances, this time the reality of having no one really hit home for me. This gentleman had lived 63 years and no doubt had touched many lives in some way or another. And yet here in his final hours, there was no one, no brokenhearted family at his side, no melancholic friends to call. His personal belongings were all that was being left behind. I stood there in silence, carefully looking around the room in the hopes of making some type of connection with the person I witnessed dying. I saw his Bible, his cell phone, and a few more personal items. I would later learn that most of his stuff would either be thrown away or given to charity. And this just broke my heart. I began thinking about what happens to veterans in situations such as that one. I would later research and discover that there is a provision and special arrangements for quote unquote unclaimed veterans, as this particular patient would be so designated, who die alone. This designation for me is similar to the potter's field that many of the unclaimed homeless individuals are buried in cities around our nation, some of whom no doubt are also veterans. I wondered what choices this particular man might have made, or what circumstances led him to this place where he had no one. When we think about the ultimate sacrifice, rarely do we think about or connect the lifelong sacrifices that soldiers also endure. When we remember the sacrifices of returned soldiers, rarely are we cognizant of the fact that many of them suffer deep and severe moral injuries, possibly as devastating as a natural death for them. Many veterans return from the service emotionally and mentally wounded with moral injuries, PTSD, and other ills as a direct result of what they experienced in the military. Who they are upon their return is far from the persons they were prior to service. They become mere shells of who they once were. Writing in a blog article entitled "Blood and Sacrifice: The Battle of a Soldier's Soul," former paratrooper Ryan Hewland details the emotional and physical costs of service for himself and his family. He remarks, "I came home, but I left a part of me over there." He went on to say, "A few years of service will give you a lifetime of demons." During his first mission in Kosovo, in the former Yugoslavia, Ryan saw children killed and maimed by landmines and homes with families still in them burned by Serbian forces. In Iraq, he witnessed terrorist insurgents using innocents as human shields. Together, those traumatic events and Ryan's own brushes with death drove him to experience survivor's guilt and to question why he was still alive while so many others had died. Moral injury is the distressing psychological, behavioral, social, and sometimes spiritual aftermath of exposure to such events. Guilt, shame, disgust, anger, destructive and abusive behavior are some of the hallmark reactions to moral injury. Moral injury happens when someone does something that goes against or contradicts their core beliefs, the beliefs that they learned early in life from their parents, family elders, their minister, and their elementary school and Sunday school teachers. One's spirituality and emotional well-being is often negatively impacted when they either perpetuate, fail to prevent, and even when they merely witness events that conflict with their moral beliefs and expectations. And it's not just war and conflict that causes suffering. Many military personnel have reported to have been abused physically, emotionally, and even sexually while in the service by fellow service personnel and unit leaders. I have a childhood friend whom I love dearly. He went into the military, participated in the first Gulf War, and who returned forever changed. He refuses to talk about his experiences, but one can glean the internal pain he feels when his service time is mentioned. He is now very emotionally ill with severe PTSD. Our relationship is now estranged because of his aggression. He became unsafe physically and emotionally for me to be around, as well as for many of his immediate family, who are also mostly estranged. I still honor the positive imprint that this friend has contributed to my life, not the self-inflicted pain and the familial alienation that his mental illness has caused. I understand that so many like him have pushed those closest away. I realize how easy it would be for me to think only about the destructive actions that my veteran friend committed after his service, rather than to consider the sacrifice he made while in the service that may have led to his current state of mind and being. We are called to remember and perhaps to seek to understand. Is this not also a sacrifice? They didn't die, but they gave their lives nonetheless. They gave up their pursuits of happiness, which for many of them, due to their emotional injuries, are now far out of reach. Their families suffer, relationships become estranged. The devastation and despair can be so great that on average in the US, 22 veteran suicides occur daily. That veteran dying at the VA hospital in Durham had no one. In that silent, private, intimate moment by his bedside, I wondered whether someone somewhere would honor a memory of him. I made up my mind in that moment that I would remember him. His name was David. He was about 5'6", a very short man with a round face, dark hair, brown eyes. He had smooth skin, a bit heavyset. I can see him clearly now. And maybe you can now also, through my recollection, get a glimpse of him too. This morning, I want to offer you an opportunity to remember and to pray, perhaps. I've heard it said that we should only acknowledge the military personnel during this time, and I respect that sentiment and do encourage this occasion to be grounded in our deceased military personnel. Also, please make a mental note or add it to your calendar in case you didn't know. Each year on Memorial Day, a national moment of remembrance takes place at 3 p.m. local time for a minute of silence to remember and honor those who have died in service to this nation. I've set my timer for 2:58. If I'm driving, I will pull over or stop what I'm doing to prepare for that moment. I encourage you to do the same. With that said, I still realize that there is an organic shifting taking place in our national consciousness around this occasion concerning to what, whom, and how we should give honor. I personally believe that it is fitting that we allow ourselves the privilege to extend this grace in honor of the many others who've lent to our lives. So I encourage you to include some additional acts of remembering. These are for your non-military deceased loved ones and friends. And this year in particular, especially after the devastating year of loss due to the COVID-19 pandemic that took so many lives across the globe, we should honor this moment. And I feel that it is also important to recognize this weekend exactly 100 years ago in Oklahoma, the Oklahoma National Guard, in essence, the military, for the first time in American history, dropped bombs on its own Black citizens during the Tulsa race massacre of 1921. Being raised in Oklahoma and living in both of its two major cities, I don't recall ever being taught about this in school. The worst race massacre in American history was left out of all the history books. But this day, we are called to remember. I feel that the most important thing here is the act of remembering, recalling, and reminiscing. I know that for some, this period and our memories of times and faces can be bittersweet. This weekend also is particularly difficult for me because it was this weekend in 1983 that my 21-year-old brother lost his life in an act of senseless violence. This weekend, 38 years ago, that my family's lives was changed forever. I have developed a process that I call communing. It is where I find some alone space, indoors or outdoors, and there I convoke thoughts about a particular deceased family member. I converse with them, often remarking about how much I miss their presence. Sometimes I'd laugh, cry, and at times revisit emotions around their physical absence. Then I begin to write down my thoughts of them in prose. I have several of these sessions written down. I sometimes will post them on social media and tag my immediate family members for them to also engage their memories and perhaps to add to the list. Here's an example. Communing with Melvin Lamar. This is the brother that I lost during the Memorial Day weekend of 1983. In remembering him, I wrote the following: your neutrality. You would say to us, y'all need to stay out of mama and daddy's business. Your independence, your eclectic necklace, your long stringy hair, your musty underarms, your black cotton wristband, your gold rings, you getting carjacked and shot in the leg, your bloody pants, your sadness about mama's car getting stolen, your smile, your musical talent, your black bongos, your last automobile, that fateful night, you in a casket, the rose from your funeral, our new puppy barking and growling at an empty space on the sofa, your last visit. We now have a unique opportunity with all of the social media outlets, instant book publishing, and the many other avenues for communication to leave something behind. Over the last few years, I have particularly paid close attention to what I put out into the world. I realize that once something is said or done by me, whatever it may be, these are my forever words and actions. And not only that, the way things are now, they might be recorded for posterity. We have some part in how we are remembered. We get to choose some parts that will become our legacy. It is my prayer that in the end, my words and deeds will speak for me in a way that honors my life and ministry, but more importantly, it honors the love that I've given away. When others reminisce about my life, I hope it inspires smiles and provoke pleasant thoughts. For my children, I want them to recall how I cooked and cared for them. I want them to remember how I prepared the table for them, often serving the meals in silver servers and fine china for the sake of memory making. I want them to remember our shared life and experiences and how I made them feel. Often when I'm delivering a eulogy, I start with words that go like this. It has been said that in the end, it is not the years of your life that count. It is the life in your years. For life should not be measured by its span of years, but by the love that is given away. Indeed, once a person transitions, the only thing that remains is what that person has shared. I then look around the room at all the pained faces of friends and loved ones who by their presence there testify to the impact the deceased made on their lives. And I say, so much of your beloved remains, because much of what they valued has passed on to those they loved. As we gather here today to say our goodbyes, it is clear that while your beloved will no longer be with us physically, their spirit and our memories of them will live on as long as each of us is alive. I then continue. In this service, we lift up their unique and humble witness to the power love has to touch others well beyond our own short lives. A famous quote reminds us of the importance of keeping the memory of those we love alive. Samuel Butler said, quote, "To die completely, a person must not only forget, but be forgotten. And he who is not forgotten is not dead," end quote. With that in mind, we can say with confidence that our daughter, mother, sister, brother, son, father, friend, our beloved is not gone completely. This is true. For as long as there is a memory of a person, that person is not gone completely. Shall we remember?